In this video, I will tell you exactly how you can switch your symptoms on and off, influencing them on demand. And this works for symptoms like fatigue, pain, depression, vertigo, migraine. But in the description, I will write down all of the symptoms that I tried this with and that it worked for. But before we start, there is a disclaimer. Please don't ever try this on other people, because maybe they're still healthy, and then just by asking them a few questions, you can switch their symptoms on, symptoms that they never had before. Usually people will go into a downward spiral, freak out completely, and it's not up to you or me or anyone to decide when other people will need to develop symptoms. So in order to do this, we can go two different ways. The first one is via the mind, and the second one is via the body. Let's start with the mind first. We do that by asking questions. For example, what would you like to achieve in your life? Who would you like to be? You know, these fundamental questions about the desire underneath everything that people are doing. And then people are going to answer that in a way that I don't really care. So they're going to answer like, I would like to be a good man, or I would like to have an impact on this planet or create a better world. You know, these types of answers. I don't really care about that. I care about the exact opposite. You see, the psyche or the mind develops us. It's sort of like capsules pain into a protective border like this, for example. So someone is going to answer with moving away from this. So I would like to make an impact. I would like to be a good man, or maybe some selfish goals, like I would like to have a really good car, for example. Moving away. Then the second question is why. This moves back to the wound again, but the person will usually deflect again and again and again. So we need to challenge the questions a little bit, challenge the person, ask a few more why questions, and then usually the person will get emotional, but he or she doesn't notice that, because the protection mechanism is always moving away from the wound is sort of like crumbling at these moments. And this is exactly when all the protection mechanisms like denying, overcompensating, all of these things no longer work. And then the person starts to get maybe emotional, maybe frustrated, maybe angry at you or me. So that's perfectly fine. This is what I'm used to in this work. Yeah. But as soon as the emotion, the wound, or the feeling, or something that someone has stored in the psyche is almost revealed, then at that point, a final protection mechanism kicks in. Symptoms. And all of a sudden, people will have pain. Maybe they think, oh, I did too much today. I'm too tired. Maybe they get a migraine attack. And that actually prevents them from going deeper. It serves them. You see, the purpose of these symptoms is to protect you. And it does that because it's overwhelming. So immediately your entire focus is upon these symptoms. Then the second thing that it always does is that these symptoms are not where you process these emotions. So these emotions are at your core, along the line of breathing. But the symptoms are everywhere else but there. So it distracts you from that. And it also it forces you to stop whatever it is that you're doing. Because the activity that you're doing, the asking the questions and finding the answers, is at that moment to be perceived as extreme dangerous. Because after many years of suppression, you have programmed yourself that these things are very, very unwanted. And I must say that at the moments that you suppress these underlying pains in your psyche, it was indeed too overwhelming. It wasn't nice. It's not a feel-good feeling. It's terrible pain, grief, shame, etc. And your psyche also wants to convince you that there is a valid reason for these symptoms, for the pain. So the pain usually goes into an old injury, because there you think, okay, this is valid. Because as soon as that no longer works, for example, with my clients, that immediately when they have a symptom, that they dive into their psyche, feel the underlying wound in their core, process it, then the entire mechanism is no longer working, if you get what I mean. This might sound very extreme, that all of the goals that you're having are basically an avoidance strategy to not feel certain things. I think that more or less you should have the 80-20 percentage in your mind. 80% is running away from pain, 20% is what you actually want. And over time, when you heal yourself, the goals that you're actually seeking for will become more and more the things that you actually want. And that's when you become more healthy. But also when you notice that the urge that you have to do these things have a lot less pressure on them. So you no longer want to achieve something with fight or flight energy, but instead you get calmer. And it's more about how you feel along the way of doing things instead of getting as fast as possible to a result. So the second way to get in contact with the underlying emotion or feelings or pain in your psyche is to go to bed as well, but this time to not be distracted by the symptoms, but instead gently breathe towards your body. Maybe 20 minutes, maybe when you're very stressed, when you have symptoms, you need to calm down a little bit, and you can actually do that by connecting with your body. And then over time, you will become aware of an emotional pressure along the line of breathing, maybe a squeezing sensation around your heart or your solar plexus, stomach, or your belly. And at these moments when there is, or maybe it's something heavy, and at these moments, I'd like you to concentrate on these. So what you're doing then is, for example, you have migraines in your head or fatigue. You're no longer distracted by that, but you go into your body and you feel. And then after a while, you will always become aware of a certain pressure somewhere. If your symptoms were mild, this is the moment where your symptoms will become more intense, because now the distraction mechanism is no longer working and the brain needs more defense. So now it's going to amplify your symptoms. And this is where most people stop because they are afraid. They're afraid to do that. But the fear that you might have might be very old and might be the very thing that you're actually trying to avoid. So a coping mechanism to control the fear is not to resolve the fear, if that makes any sense. So this is how we switch symptoms on. And how do we switch them off again? And that's actually very simple. We are not distracted by the symptoms, but we keep being in touch with the emotions. And after some groundwork, you might be able to release the emotion, release the pressure, or feel whatever it is that needs to be felt. And at these moments, the symptoms might amplify while you're doing that. But as soon as you completely release it, when you cry, shiver, shake, when you feel the absolute worthlessness or the feeling that you desperately don't want to feel, the opposite of wanting to be a good man, being a very bad boy, is that what that means? Shame. Feel that completely through, and that's always loaded with emotions. So you cry a little bit or shake or shiver or maybe burp, etc. And then after a full release, when there's nothing left in your upper body, when you don't stop too early, or sometimes people need a few sessions in order to release it fully, then there is no more need for a protection mechanism because there is nothing to protect you from this layer. I mean, it's always layered. And then symptom free. And this is where most clients are like, wait, I was fooling myself for so many years. And this is how it actually works. But then something curious starts. Then you have to learn how to actually peel layer after layer off. Because there's not just one thing in your psyche that you're avoiding. It might be hundreds of things everywhere. It's a little bit of shame, a little bit of grief, a little bit of pain, a little bit of fear, a little bit of anger. And in our society, we have been taught to always move away from the pain. So it's very normal to achieve being a good man or to make the world a better place. But we only want that because we feel that there is a bad place. And that bad place is inside of ourselves. And that is waiting for your attention and your time. And it is painful. It is difficult. But when this landed, when you feel like, okay, I would like to know more about this. Maybe already you would like to see if you can make your symptoms worse. If you're ready for that. Just to know that you'll be able to find out exactly what it is underneath your symptoms. I think that is actually very empowering. People underestimate that. But if you're ready for that, then I made a playlist with a lot of guided sessions. And in the release program, we have around 50 or 60 or 70 for all different things. But there are already quite a few simple and relaxed ones here on YouTube. And I'll encourage you to check them out and to see what you can do if you can influence it. So good luck.